All right, San Diego. So it's September already. But man, if there were ever some numbers that I would like, so if I'm thinking about maybe I'm thinking about doing something on the buy side or the sell side the next, I don't know, 6 to 12 months. Maybe you've caught some of these videos before. You've been like, all right, cool, check. You are not going to want to miss this one because there are two numbers that it's like, man.
Important. And also we're going to talk a little bit about strategy now that rates are coming down.
Yep.
What are you going to do about getting out of your current place into that next place? And there are some very specific things you want to avoid and some things that you can do to be better in that position.
Imagine that. San Diego, I don't know how else to do this other than just like purport what I'm seeing. We can even throw it up on the screen so that you don't have to take my word for it. So, first of all, sales down 5.4%. That's like nothing too crazy, even though it's reflecting last summer, which I don't know if you guys remember last summer, but whole last year was terrible when it came to real estate. Like some of the county was like 50% normal deal flow. So to be down off of those numbers is definitely curious because things are better right now than they were last year. I think we can all agree on that.
Yeah.
So rates have been a little higher, okay, like in the last 60-ish, 90 days.
Yeah.
And then of course homes are still continuing to go up in value. So it's not like it's like blasphemous, right? You can justify the fact that less people are super stoked to whip out the checkbook, stroke a check. But here's where it gets weird. While the median is up just over 7 figures now, we're about $1.58. So that happened. I think we're up. That's a 6.6% jump. So we tripped back up over the 7-figure mark. But inventory countywide is up 50.4%. What say you, Jeremy?
A lot more homes on the market, right? Prices continuing to go up, though. So it's a little bit of a mixed bag right there with statistically.
Well, it's not just that. It's like it's like a couple stones are sort of falling down the hill innocuously, and all of a sudden it's like the big boulder of 50 point. Dude, that's insanity.
It's a giant number.
That's a giant number.
But 50% of 10 is only 5, right? So you start to see how the limited amount of transactions are having an impact statistically.
That is true, and I appreciate you not stepping over that. I think the larger issue, though, is that where does it bust? Like, where does it break? Because if this continues to roll, we're in for a pretty big shift. And then, of course, the prices are next, right? Because when you got competition, you got parity, you got more options, you got less people stroking checks.
Yeah. And so real quick, though, based on those particular numbers, we have an opposing force, which is rates coming down.
Right.
As rates come down, homes become more affordable, more buyers may be re-entering the market. So I think we've got this convergence of force, and I know you've got some other numbers that are going to have an impact on that conversation.
Well, but they're all kind of saying similar stuff, right? So, I mean, if you look down at the Altos, right, you can, and I think this is a link you can click on under the video, depending on where you're finding this. But, we keep this like market action index. It's kind of just like a tachometer, right? And if it's fully over to the right, it's seller side left, and you got parity in the middle. So we're starting now to see the capitulation further, though, toward the buyer side. Now that makes sense, right? So even though there's not a lot of homes for sale, seller side, and even though the prices seem to still be going up, that's seller side. That massive boulder that we just mentioned, metaphorically rolling down the hill, is so impactful that it's actually offsetting those two things and sliding over on buyer side.
Yeah, and for buyers' perspective, more homes on the market is a better thing for them, right? You have more opportunity to say, hey, if I'm not going to buy your house, I'm going to go buy that house, right?
Yeah.
So opportunity for buyers in that manner.
100%. And so numbers aside, what my humble hypothesis is, the IMO, is that the people who are in a sarcophagus, aka 3% mortgage rate, and a price that they got reasonably, it doesn't like 50 years ago that was passed down to 3 generations. We're talking like in the last 10 years. You might have gotten a house for $650 that's now worth 1.2. Easily. Right. So you got your $650, you've outgrown it, or for whatever reason it's time to do this. You don't want to remodel because that's a terrible thing. That's a pit of hell, right? So then you're like, hey, it's time for me to move. But what are you going to do? You're going to trade in your 3? Hell no, dude. The economy ain't that hot, right? And if you try to step up basis, you might not even be able to afford the house that you got right now.
Yeah, that's the trick.
Do you know what I mean?
That's what's been keeping the market where it is now.
Exactly.
That's why prices have been able to hold steady, but we're seeing the turn.
Yeah.
And this is what you alluded to in the beginning of this conversation.
That's right.
Is as these rates fall, we're going to see buyers more aggressively enter the market.
That's right.
And we're going to see that price point probably held up to some extent. But more properties mean more decisions. Sellers are competing a little bit more, so that we're right there on that little precipice. And people are no longer afraid of the fact that they have a 3% mortgage right now.
Yeah.
So we're down into the low 6s, into the 5s. What happens if Fed cuts rates and we start going further down? We enter the 4s. I mean, that's virtually a trade. We're never going to see 3 again.
That's
Everybody's aware of that.
That's right. And I think that there's this convergence of a couple variables right now, which seem to almost be creating this big hurricane storm from the, the Doppler radar deal. It's like one of the marbles falling in are rates dropping, right? The other marble falling in is that it's an election year. Okay. And that's a thing we can hit on. And the third marble is kind of a macro of like, we've been kind of in a little bit of a stagnant pit of hell in real estate. Like the transactions that are kind of popping through are almost the necessity ones. Like there's not a lot of volition buying and trading, right? It's like, I got to move out, or I'm done with California, or whatever. Like these little bing, bing, bings. Like at a macro level, it's been pretty boring these last, 2-3 years, right? Post-COVID, and then when the rates started going up. So this convergence of this trinity of these three things, it's like creating the energy of the storm. And I think that from here to the election year, it's probably going to be much of the same.
Yeah.
Maybe the rates will pop down a little bit, like you said. Maybe that spawns some activity. But people love to kind of wait to see which gang gets in the White House.
Yeah.
Like it actually matters.
I know.
Historically, it doesn't matter, by the way, if you want to look at the stats. But we all claim to think it matters.
That's right.
So on the other side of November, nothing's going to happen in December. Nothing ever does. Go buy some Christmas gifts.
Right.
Make the economy look good. And then comes 25. So what do you think 25 looks like?
Yeah, I think that this topic that we're hitting on, and I'm at the risk of repeating myself again, I think the rates are going to do everything, right? So how fast do the rates fall? How far do they come down? And how does that impact the folks that already have a home? Because remember, this whole log jam that's happened over the last couple of years is because people don't want to sell because they don't have anywhere to go. You just said it, like, I can't even afford my own home. Right? Like, so what are you going to do? So as these rates start to come down, we're going to see people get released from that, I think you called it sarcophagus, and start to open up. If someone who owns a home goes and buys a home, they typically sell that home, right? Inventory, creating a little bit less pressure and starting to open things up a little bit, maybe get a more normalized market. You talk about days on market, you talk about inventory and how they're related to last year, but we're still, do you remember those conversations we were having? Like inventory being like 1 month?
Dude.
That's an absurdly low number. It's actually better if inventory is a little bit more.
100%.
Right? So we're starting to see, even though they're numbers that maybe you don't want to see go in that direction because it feels a little bit weird, we're seeing a market normalizing, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
Where buyers and sellers no longer have these giant disparities and we can go out and sell a house and buy a house like you're supposed to be able to.
That's right. And it's not binary. This is actually a really good point that you just mentioned. I want to shine a light on it. Like everything feels like it's like this win-loss black-white thing, right? Like you said, inventory at 1 month. That's supposed to make sellers go, all right, we won that one, right? It's like all the way to seller. No, because you pan back just a little bit and you realize that most sellers end up being buyers.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So, the fact that that happened is not a good thing writ large.
Right.
Right. Now, once it gets kind of closer to parity, if it slides a little here, it slides into there, you can maybe exercise that and do a little bit of a win for your team, whichever way you're, but like big picture though, like that's not healthy. Right. And we've been so far away from healthy. You could even make an argument, which I don't want to get too historical here, but you could say like early aughts may have been the last time that our market actually behaved independent of itself, right? Like, because then came the big run up and that was infiltrated by all of the subprime loans and the fog of glass and get a loan, and that went wonky. Then we had to fix the wonky. They started printing money, the quantitative easing, all that stuff. That continued into almost forever land. I think it just quit like last month or maybe a year or two ago. And then that moved into post-COVID. Yeah. Which you COVID then, and then post, like, how long has it been since we've actually had like just a legit normalized, real estate market and mortgage market?
Yeah, where the headline isn't someone loses, right? Buyers lose, sellers lose, whatever that is, right? Yeah, this is actually a good thing, but there's still strategy. right? So when you think about how you're going to navigate this market, it's super important that you're taking into consideration all the pieces. Even though inventory's up, it's still tight. So if you're a buyer, you need to have your you-know-what together before you enter that conversation.
By the way, shout out to San Diego homebuyerclass.com because that's a monthly thing right there. We should do that little plug. But you're absolutely right.
Good. So for buyers right now, what we're helping them do is get prepared with their current home to be able to go out and get another home.
100%.
We're doing that through leverage, strategy, reaping equity, all these things that have been a little bit weird, right? Like my home went up, you know, $200,000, but I can't afford to go buy my other. So how do we leverage that for a win? And that's what I think we're starting to see is the ability to do these little strategies here to get ready for that next one so that you can be the one that the seller chooses.
And you're making another great point too, which is spawning this thought, which is
2 and 1.
2 and 1, dude. So don't get a fat head, okay?
I guess we're going long.
So one of the challenges right now, and again, we're talking about this almost hypothetically because, you know, yeah, the stats are coming in and yeah, we're talking about rates going down, but that's not actually true right now today. Like when you're watching this today, you're still in the middle of the suck of the belly of the whale, right? So even if we're right or wrong or whatever, the two challenges are the stress level of somebody actually raising their hand and saying, I'm ready and willing to go through that is legit.
Yeah.
Right? It's not like some BetterHelp stuff. By the way, we're not sponsored by BetterHelp. Oh. But like it's also like just you'd much rather do dentistry on yourself than put yourself through that from a stress perspective. Secondly, and this is kind of a little cousin to that, which is control. And really in this case, it's a lack of control. Like as a seller, you're like, oh yeah, no problem. I'm going to sell that thing and probably make more money with it than I even thought I was going to, you know, get in the first place. But then you're out of the pot and into the flame, right? Because then you know you're trying to be a buyer.
It's easy to get out of the plane. What do you do once you're floating through the air, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So the control factor of the buy then sell situation is probably the most deadliest component of the whole thing. Because when you just pull yourself out of that pressure cooker and just kind of sit inside the vacuum, you can take a breath, you have pace, you have cadence, you have rhythm, and you go, kind of like that one, not so much. I'll throw an offer on that. I don't care if they get accepted. Oh, cool. That's one I would totally buy. Let me go. Oh, and by the way, I look really cool because I'm basically all cash.
Right.
To the seller, that's not a bad spot to be in when you got 2 or 3 or 4 other offers.
Down payment that came out of the air and the equity from your home that you've been so diligent saving.
And if they say no, it's okay. You don't have to be. You're not going to be homeless in an extended stay hotel in 2 weeks
or your short-term rental at $7,000 a month.
There you go. Right. So it just gives the consumer the ability to actually pretend for a moment that they're going to enjoy the process and actually believe, which this is true, that they have control of the process. So you access your money, you go wield that like a big fat sword out in the market. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And when it does, you're good, dude.
It reminds me of when you're buying your first home and you've got a good rental situation and you're kind of like, are kicking in money. Right. So you've got like, and I have clients that are like, hey, we'll buy the right place if it comes around, but we're not in a hurry. Like that mentality is so freeing.
That's right.
And it actually helps you make good decisions. So more important than being stress-free, it allows you to make decisions that aren't under pressure, which can lead to, oh my God, I better do that because otherwise I'll lose it. And that panic and that stress can cost you money, energy, regret, all that stuff.
Here's where I'd like to get this back on track, okay? It's September, okay? So if you haven't in earnest really fired up the whole, the whole war machine of the in or out right now, maybe you're not thinking you're going to pull something off by the end of the year. That might be true, right? Even though we just said at the top that it doesn't really matter which gang, the red or the blue, what is the Crips or the blood, whatever, gets in the White House. It doesn't really matter big picture, right? There might be some little things here or there, like I think it was the Democratic ticket that was talking about doing a $15,000. What was it?
Credit for
thing.
First-time homebuyers.
Yeah,
it's not going to happen.
Right, and that's just the thing, right? It's like it's good politics, right? Regardless of which gang gets into the White House, like making sure that you have enough of an on-ramp in terms of time, right? Now, make the point in reverse this way. The worst possible phone call we get is when somebody calls up and they're like, hey, I got to do something like next weekend. Right. Now, most traditional sales shops love that because they're like, oh, sweet. fastest, sprint to a commission
Sign
check.
here.
But if you're actually playing the long game and you're treating your client's money like it's your money, right? And you're building a portfolio the same way an artist has a portfolio of people and deals and homes. Yeah, you want to give yourself a little bit of a berth on that, right?
Sure.
If you do have a home to sell, well, there's at least a couple months, like maybe a month minimum, but like a couple months would be great to do a walkthrough, figure out, hey, you're living in the home. So you're not actually like seeing it the way Martha Stewart would see it, to do the walkthrough, room by room review. Hey, we could pop this, pop that, and then come up with a game plan where you can slowly execute it, not with the, proverbial gun to your head, right? And then get yourself ready for an eventual market time. Get some of these strategies in place because all of it's got to happen anyway. And then maybe, just maybe, you can time it right to where you can take advantage of these numbers that we talked about, maybe even part of the off season before it gets crazy.
I was just going to say that.
By spring or summer of next year and be able to pull off both.
Right. I'm reminded of how many times we've gone through these real estate cycles, right? Where like busy time means you're supposed to. But what about when it's not busy? Like, what about if you're one of the only offers? Like, that might actually be a good thing, right? Or what if you're one of the only homes on the market? That might be a good thing. So timing is not just let's time it where everybody says I'm supposed to be. Timing could be relative to your particular scenario.
Well said, man.
Yeah.
Give us a
so,
little.
Look, here's the deal. The Greenhouse Group, it's our goal to meet you where you are, plan a strategy, put everything in place before you hit the ground so you don't end up with regret, stress. Let us help you put a strategy together. We've got home buyer classes. We've got first-time seller classes. We've got all kinds of stuff available for you.
That's right.
Or heck, we can do an old-fashioned phone call.
Yeah. And full-service shop, too. So, you need mortgage, you need some money, you need some help on the real estate
Massage.
side. That's on him. You heard it here. Hey, thank you for checking in, though. And if you like this, go ahead and give us a pop with the thumbs or give it a little sharesies. All that stuff helps. Throw us a comment so we can start a conversation, and we'll see you back here next month.